I know it's green. Ready? Okay. All right, welcome. I'd like to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. The first item we have on the agenda is assignment for request for council action. We have 2131 increased expenditure PO 2571 Goodyear Tire Sanitation, 2132 expenditure over 15,000 Drug Mart Job Creation Grant payments, 2133 CARES Act resolution, 2134 refinancing existing debt and possible new debt issue, 2135 resolution against racism, 2136 2020 codification update, 2137 MCRC summer special membership sale extension, 2138 grant application Medina Municipal Airport obstruction removal study, 2139 task order number 5 for Delta Airport Consultants obstruction removal study, 2140 railroad emergency repair then and now, 2141 accept donations to keep Memorial Pool open, 2142 MCRC partner marketing contract extension, 2143 bids for project 947 Municipal Airport Detention Basin, and 2144 increased expenditure PO 201160 Rocco Masonry Public Buildings. We have the second one is a motion to approve the MCRC renewal and replacement banners. Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is partner marketing bringing us, these are already two sponsors that we already have. They just wanted to change their banners that are currently hanging on the rack or the track railing. You'll notice it's just a change in design, but one of the good things about the Redwood was they actually are giving a discount for the first month to any rec center members for rent for the Redwood. So that's all I got for that.
Thank you. Questions?
I'm going to need to abstain because part of the money goes to my employer.
Other questions?
Move to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Motion carries. 20078, consider how to handle disconnects after ordinance 6220 expires. Mr. Durham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know if you can. Thank you, Mr. President. The order from Ordinance 62 expires the end of June, and as you saw from what I sent you, the state's order, which superseded that, expires July 10th. So we, in the ordinary course of business, we would be back to turning wrenches after July 10th. Today is due date for the June due bills, so we would typically send shutoff notices tomorrow. We could delay that a day or two because we would also typically do shutoffs earlier in July. We'll be waiting till after the expiration of the order, obviously, with no further action from you. But we would like to have clarity on what we're going to authorize as far as payment plans. So when people call in and want to go on a payment plan, we can set that up for them and establish that for them. And if there's any plan to waive penalties. The other thing is, at the point that we're at now, maybe we should consider extending Ordinance 6230 or 6220 another month so that we do shutoffs in August, but that's up to you. That way we'd know what the payment plans were before we sent the notices.
Can you give us the numbers on the history and what currently happened during the COVID?
We have, we had 268 delinquent accounts in March. Generated $9,190.86 in penalties. We had 377 delinquent accounts in April, generated $10,235.16 in penalties. In May, we had 256 accounts, so the numbers were down, but the penalty amount was up. It was $10,379.31. So what that indicates is that the penalties were down because a lot of people got on unemployment or they got their stimulus checks or whatever they were able to pay. But those who weren't able to pay, their balances went up because the remaining 256, it's like I said, down about 120 from the previous month, but the total penalty amount was up. So the people that are still delinquent are getting further and further behind.
What about shutoffs?
We had, this is what would have been our shutoff list for June. There were 92 accounts still on shutoff on the day. We didn't shut off because of the suspension, but on the day that we ordinarily would have, there were still 92 accounts on shutoff. Talking to Nino and so on, that is way more than we normally do. We normally do maybe a couple dozen.
Yeah, what do we normally do in a typical month to month? Is it like 24, 30 a month? 30 under a month? So we have 90 now, so there's 60 more people on our shutoff list that would otherwise not be on our shutoff list.
Right.
Okay. Well, the question that we always talked about, I think, up here a little bit was, we don't want to reward those people who are generally on a shut-off list every month. The question is, if you were affected by COVID, that's when you get the help. You don't just get the help because you've always been late and you're getting shut off every month. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But what do people think about what to do about shutoffs, what to do about penalties, and what to do about payment of used water bill, the water bills over the months that haven't been paid?
Could I add one thing before you go through that? The penalties, we can waive penalties for June because we haven't assessed them yet, and we could waive penalties for July or any future months. We checked with our software vendor to find out if we could reverse penalties from a prior month, and there is not a way in our software system for us to do that as a single entry. We can remove penalties, but it has to be done one account at a time. So if you want me to go backwards and waive out penalties for May, there were 256 accounts, and people in my office are going to have to go into each one of those accounts, do a waiver, do a notation, and then we have to keep documentation because the auditors always want to see it when we do an adjustment on an account.
When you say you waive the penalties for, let's say, May, does that also waive them for April and March and all that? When you waive one, you can do them all? You got to go each month?
We'd have to go each month on each individual account.
Is the software vendor going to correct that error that they have in their software?
Well, it never came up before, so it wasn't really an error until now, but we do have the new software coming, and we think we would be able to do it with that, but we're not going to have that in this time frame. So if you want to waive future penalties, that's no problem for my office at all. If you want to go back, we're going to have a substantial amount of man hours invested in going through and doing that.
Well, I guess the question of future penalties that we'll talk about, the COVID's still going on, but the emergency orders by the governor are gone. So the question is, what happened during those orders is something different that maybe happened after. Now, there may still be lingering effects, of course, but how do you judge that? How do you weigh that? How do you pick who and choose who's deemed quote-unquote worthy and who isn't? Those are big questions because there's been people that have always been late. And I guess my point is, I'm not sure they should be when I say rewarded, forgiven the penalties and fees and all that just because they're always late. I don't know. But go ahead, Danny.
First of all, I liked your idea of extending the shut off until the end of August, if we're able to do that. As far as the penalties, and I understand what you're saying, and I know Keith and his staff could come up with a list of people that are frequently delinquent. In my mind, I always question why are they delinquent? Is it because they're having a hard time? There are people that are choosing to pay for prescriptions or food versus paying their water bill. And I know we have it's an enterprise fund. It's a business to run. My goal would be to see people to get on a payment plan to get caught up, and I know it's going to be a nightmare for your office and staff, Keith, but to get on a payment plan. And it's probably going to have to be on an individual basis, I would think, that from this point forward, you are going to have to be current every month unless, the governor extends this, which is always a possibility if the numbers go up. But as far as interest and penalties, I would like to see those waived, and I know that would be a financial hit for us, and especially being an enterprise fund that it's not going to be something that we can easily absorb. I know Jess had put in a request for $25,000 for emergency funds, and we've, I think, spent $5,000 of that at Cups Cafe.
2,500.
Or $2,500. So we still have some money from that emergency fund. There's two items, on the agenda tonight. This and the pool. Obviously, I'm in favor of the pool reopening, but I'm more in favor of people not having their water shut off. I want to see them catch up to get on a payment plan to do that. I don't know if we can, if it's even feasible to sit there and say, okay, your rearage, you're going to have to pay an extra $100 a month or something. I don't know if we can do that. That's why I think it's going to have to be more on an individual basis. But as far as penalties and interest, I would like to see those waived.
Well, just to follow up on two things. The one thing about the water bills, if you recall, we had a situation where people the inside meter didn't match the outside meter a while back, and they paid over time, we could probably use that same structure.
Sure.
As far as the penalties and interest, I would agree with you in a certain respect. I would agree to waive them, but the only way that it could be waived, if they get on a payment plan and they follow their payment plan, at the end of that payment plan, all their penalties and fees would be waived. But if they don't, then they get charged those penalties and fees, because you have to give some type of incentive.
No, I agree.
I like that.
Anybody else?
John?
Jess?
Yes. I like what you just said, but we keep having this discussion about frequent flyers and whether we're rewarding them. I guess my question is, does it really matter? If they're not paying their bill, obviously they're not paying it for a reason. Most people need water, and they try to make it a priority. As Councilman Simpson said, sometimes you just have to pay for other things. So I think that we should just stop talking about it. It doesn't matter if they were behind all the time for the last 5 years. Who cares? They need to be offered the same courtesies that we're extending to all the other people due to the COVID crisis.
Bill?
I guess I would just want to know specifically what the repayment plan is going to be, exactly how the repayment plan is going to work. Because my concern is if you're behind for whatever reason, you're behind financially for whatever reason, and so simply because we determine that after August we're going to begin shutoffs again and then we're going to start the repayment plan, that doesn't necessarily correspond with someone's improvement or ability to either make the monthly payment or to address the penalty. So my sense is that the repayment plan should be, not to say it's lenient, but it should be a consideration over a period of time to give people enough time to get current, and then enough time to begin to address, the money that they owe from failing in the past to pay their bill on time. And if that period of time was 6 months or 8 months, so be it, because it's better to get the money over 8 months than it is to simply have people become delinquent again in month 1 or month 2 or month 3 as we move out. Water is pretty much a necessity, and I agree with Jess. I mean, why we mull over this idea that some people intentionally don't pay their bill or they take advantage of the city or whatever. I don't know how you quantify that, and even why we particularly do. I mean, that's just a fact, I guess, that some people are behind, but there's probably a reason for that. And I think we need to take that into consideration, but extend that period of time for catching up on the penalties and catching up on what they owe. And I think the penalties absolutely should be for the period when we weren't shutting off. We should forgive those penalties during that period of time.
Just forgive them, or should you say you got to keep on your plan, and if you follow the plan that we implement for you, then it's all forgiven. But if you don't, and I would even go further. Now, is the average water bill we're talking about for a month is like $35? Is that correct?
No, more like 45.
$45.50, and there's 300 of them.
But not all of those people are on shutoff. So I guess that's a question that I have. If you're putting people on payment plan and saying, okay, we're going to waive out their penalties because they're on a payment plan, are we not waiving the penalties for people who didn't get into a payment plan situation?
Well, they all have to get into I guess you're correct. If they pay it off now, I guess the answer would be yes.
Right. And you remember, you get penalized. The 10% applies if you're 1 month late. You don't go on a shutoff notice until you're 2 months late. So just the run-of-the-mill regular accounts that owed $50 in March didn't pay it before the due date. And I mean, some of those, the payment comes in a day or two after, but they got hit with a $5 penalty because they hadn't paid their bill before the due date. So I don't know if this is what you want to do, but do you want to waive it for the people who got so far behind that they ended up on a payment plan, and not waive it for the people who were just a week late, 2 weeks late?
Well, I
monthly.
don't think you can decide it. I guess what I would do, and they kept talking about this extra money that we set aside for COVID, to even assist the people and maybe come up with a hard date. Maybe it's July, maybe June 30th, or maybe it's July 31st, but provide them maybe $25 towards their water bill. Everybody who's on the list, 250 people. If you give them all $25, that's, what is that? It's 25 times 250. That's $6,250 that we could use of our money that goes towards payment of the water bill. That'll assist them in paying it. Now, if you give them that benefit to say, hey, we're going to give you a little bit of money to help you because you're behind. Now you're on this plan, and maybe it's 6 months or 8 months. You got to pay an extra, whatever it would be. If they're $150 behind, then you divide 150 times the 8 months, and that's what's extra a month. And if you keep on that schedule, your fees and penalties will be waived. If not, you got to owe them all. Because I truly believe there's an incentive there, because we're not it's money, correct, but if we give them a little bit of money to help pay their bill and then implement a payment plan and then say, you got to follow it or you pay these fees, I think that's pretty fair. And plus we're helping them because we understand it's a difficult time, and we may be helping those who knows why they didn't pay it. I mean, there's all different type of reasons, but I guess I agree with you. You can never tell. But there's some reason because they don't have the money to pay it. So maybe that's the way to do it. And then, the shutoffs, I think shutoffs are kind of important. And if they're on a plan to pay it, if they don't pay it, well, I guess you have to shut them off anyways, because if they can't make even the plan payment anymore, I mean, you're just going to keep digging a deep hole, and you're never going to get it paid. So there's got to be a time, right?
So when would we begin the shutoffs?
I don't know. We got to decide that. But Paul, you had something about
Yeah,
that?
I do agree with you with regard to we need to give them some sort of incentive to stay on their plan. And I think to be a little generous, along with maybe giving them some sort of stipend or assistance out of the fund, stretch it out to 12 months. Give them a little bit longer, reduce the monthly payment on what's in the arrears, and then give them a list of places that they can go for assistance through the county, the state, or whatever, because obviously they've got a problem. Whatever it is, there's a problem there. There are organizations, agencies to help them, even if it's just helping them basic budgeting. You get this much coming in, you can only spend this much. You can't spend all this, and things like that. The more I talk to people, the more I'm seeing they just don't know how to budget their money. They got $1,200 and poof, it was gone.
We do have a list of agencies that help people out with their water bills that we typically give out every month when people are on shutoff. One thing, just a note for people, and to mention this and anybody watching at home, a lot of those agencies that will help out with a water bill, they will help out with the water bill. They will not help out with the deposit. They will not help out with a service charge. So when somebody gets actually shut off, we charge them a service charge for the cost of our sending a guy out to turn the wrench back on, and we charge a deposit. So we always tell people you want to make sure you get this taken care of before you get shut off, because if you go to one of these agencies looking for help, they might pay your bill. They're probably not going to pay the deposit and service charge.
And what was the number again? You said that this month was a 250 or 300. Did you say, or what was the number
For this month?
Yeah,
As of today, due date's not till tomorrow, but as of today we have 289.
390.
Today's due date, we would run penalties tomorrow
So it
morning.
might be somebody probably might
Yeah,
have paid it.
it might be
My
285,
suggestion
but
would be, and I think I like Paul's idea, 12 months for the payback period, and you could take whatever's due and have the deadline being June 30th. Let's say no shutoffs for June, and then the shutoffs start in July, because that'll be for the June payments. And in addition to that, I would recommend if there's 289, maybe, is that wrong?
well, I think we were saying we were extending the suspension to July because we can't shut off till July 10th anyway.
Oh, I got you. I get you. I see. So it'll be August. But then
July 31st.
But then, then give for an incentive to show that we understand the situation, either pick a number on the 289 accounts, whether it be $25, whether it be $30 or $35, whatever it is, towards those water bills, because the money we would be paying, we'd be paying ourselves, right? And that would give them assistance to, at least get them 1 month payment or close to a month's payment out of the way, and then they can get them back on their feet.
I had mentioned this before, but I want to reiterate it just to make sure. We talked about it in the office, and one thing we want to do is we want to make sure that everyone needs to contact us to get on the payment plan, because my concern is if we don't have that requirement, we just automatically put people on a payment plan. Okay. I'm going to have people 6 months from now calling me saying, why do I have this extra charge on my bill? Things like that. So what I would like to do, I've given you a copy a couple times of the notice we've put with the disconnection notice, because we've continued to send the disconnection notices even though we're not actually disconnecting, and we've put this notice that explains council passed the ordinance to suspend disconnections, et cetera. I mean, I would like to put a notice with the disconnects when we're actually going to do it, with whatever we come up with here, and we're narrowing down towards something to say, okay, council's going to pay $25 towards your bill. We're going to waive the penalties. We're going to do a 12-month payment plan, whatever it is. But you need to contact us. And it would be on that notice that says, okay, shutoffs will resume. If you do not contact us prior to this, your account will be terminated on or after August 5th, whatever that date is. But then tell people on that notice, we have some things available. We can do a payment plan. Contact us and we'll take care of that.
Eric? Keep talking about the penalties going back on there if they miss their payment again, is kind of make them pay it. But we do have that incentive because we're going to be doing water shutoffs again. So if they don't pay their bill, they will lose water as well. So there's still that incentive there. So I don't know that we need to threaten them with adding more money to it. Also, talking about trying to get them on the payment plan, we could set it up as the $25 or whatever is part of the you sign up, you get this $25 towards it. So like it's an incentive thing to actually sign up for the payment plan, right? If you're just expected to call and you're gifted the $25, you're like, yay, I'll call tomorrow, and then you never do. But I mean, that gives them a little incentive.
So when you're talking about penalties and fees, you're talking about waiving those that exist currently, but going forward in July then, because the July bills will happen, I guess then, that's when the penalties start accruing again?
Yes, when we go back to turning off water, I would imagine the penalties would start accruing again, yeah? Go back to a
Because that's
normal
a
system.
It would be up to you whether the penalty applied to the payment plan amounts. We haven't always done that. And within the system, we can set up, there are certain charges that we can set up that don't incur penalties.
Well, I think in the future, if you're on a payment plan and you miss and you get a penalty, I assume you're off the payment plan. I mean, because you're not going to miss a payment and still be on the payment plan. I mean, the whole idea of the payment plan is you stick with it. If you miss a payment, I mean, you got to fall back into the barrel again and you can get a shut off.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, but there's a definition thing here, miss versus late. If somebody misses and does not pay, I think they need to be back on the shutoff list, and because otherwise this hole's going to get deeper and deeper and they're not going to ever be able to get out. But if they're just late, are we just going to charge them the penalty on the current amount or the current amount and the payment plan? That's a decision for you to make.
Current amount, yeah.
And just the current amount, not the payment plan. So, okay, if they're behind, well, we're talking 12 months now, so we're saying maybe a $50 service, a $50 payment plan amount. So, okay, if they get a $50 bill and $50 payment, so their bill is $100, but the penalty would only be $5 because we're only penalizing the current amount. And that's a missed payment, but for the initially it's only late. It isn't missed until we actually get to shut off day. You understand what I mean? So when they get to due date, it's late, but then if they pay it between then and shut off, that's fine. If they get all the way to shut off, okay, now it's missed, and we've got to do something different. If that makes sense.
Sure. Okay, so what does everybody want to do?
I think you can be late but not missed.
Right, that makes sense. And just the current amount for the late penalty. But one thing that I would like to suggest is, a lot of people get their water bill, and you do put that nice notice in there, a lot of other things, but they know they can't pay it, so they toss it. And they know that on the 3rd of the month, they get the water bill. Say 10 days later, 15 days later, whatever, if you don't get a response from those on the list, send them a second one. I know it's an additional cost, but then you're giving them a second notice, and then they're going, hey.
Usually our customers, the disconnection notice, if you haven't seen one, that's good.
Sorry.
The disconnection notice, it is printed in red on the address block, disconnection notice. And most of our customers open those.
Okay. Right.
They don't necessarily open the monthly bill, but when they get the notice that says disconnected notice, that's a little bit more attention
So you
grabbing.
would do something in red to let people know you're invited to join this payment plan thing?
Right. And we would put I'm thinking we would put a slip in it like we did to let them know that disconnects were suspended. We'd put a slip in it, it'd be a third of a sheet that would say, here's the payment plan, here's the information, give us a call, we can work this out for you.
Okay, but
Well,
there'll
and
be
I-
something there that they will know that this is not your normal water bill.
Yeah, because the disconnection notice will point that out.
Right.
Okay,
And I would like to just also, excuse me, add, with our local media, our city newsletter, once the payment plans are set up and we finalize this, that through advertisement that we could encourage people, if you are having problems, or maybe you're just going to have to be 5 days late, and I know it's an inconvenience for your department, but please call.
Well, and that's a very good point, because we always tell people, we can work with people if you contact us.
Right.
If you don't contact us, the wrench comes.
Right.
Because at some point, basically we have to get your attention. And I mean, a certain number of people aren't going to read it. They're not going to call. They're not going to do anything. And those people are going to get shut off. And then they're going to get called when they want to get their water turned back on, and we'll work it out with them. But it's going to be a lot cheaper and a lot easier for the people who call us before the wrench comes. Because if you call before the wrench comes, I mean, we're accustomed to people calling saying, hey, I don't get paid till Friday. Can you do something with this? Those kinds of things we can handle before the wrench comes.
Right.
After the wrench comes, there's not much we can do for you.
Right.
It's already off. You got to pay. And now it's an extra $150 because there's a deposit and a service charge.
But I'd like just to thank you and your entire staff, because it is going to be a lot of extra work for you, and I understand if we're going to be doing away with the penalties if people remain on their payment plans, it is going to affect the water account. But me personally, I appreciate everything you guys do and everything you're going to have to do in the future.
Thank you.
Jim?
I was going to say, Keith, can you go back for a minute? Talk about somebody who's late versus, but they pay in time before the shut off. So if it's $50, you gave that example, 50 for the current bill, 50 on the payment plan.
Right. If that's the example, so we said 12 months. So let's say somebody owed $600. We would put them on if we decide a 12-month payment plan, we put them on a 12-month payment plan of $50 a month. So assuming their water use never changes, which obviously isn't true, but just for the example, it works. Every month they're going to get a bill that's $50 in current charges and $50 in payment plan.
And then if they haven't paid by today's date,
then they
they're
would
gonna
get
pay 55 plus 50.
right. So it would go from 100 to 105, because I think the consensus is we're not going to penalize the payment plan amounts. So we would just penalize the current charges. So then their bill would be 105, and then we would send a disconnection notice on the basis of the 105, and they would have another couple of weeks before they actually got turned off. So if they paid before they got turned off, and then the other thing is, just to let you know, they don't have to pay everything to get off the disconnect list. They have to pay the delinquent. So they'd have to pay the 50 to get off, not the other 55, because that's only a current month. And that's just how the system normally works. If you normally get a $50 bill, you don't pay it, there's a $5 penalty. There's no disconnection notice for that first month. So then the next month you get another 50. So now you owe 105. If you don't pay that, we add 1050 in penalties, then we send the disconnect notice.
Well, then if you disconnect, they got to pay a fee to get turned back on.
$50 reconnect fee.
Yes.
In addition to putting whatever we decide in with the water bill, Ms. Marshall, can you put that in the economic development newsletter that comes out every week? And can we have Barbara create or make some sort of statement for social media?
Yeah, if Keith gives us the verbiage of whatever it is that he needs, just as long as it can be brief and concise, we can put that in the newsletter and then put that on our Facebook page.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out what we talked about here. So, well, what we talked about was 12-month payback plan. Is that correct? Everybody on a 12-month
Yes.
payback plan?
Correct. Sure.
We talked about no shutoffs until after July 31st.
Correct.
Is that what we talked about?
Well,
Yes.
Well,
Okay,
does that work,
3.
Keith, or what is extending 1 month?
That's 1 month, because your original ordinance 6220 expires June 30th. So we extend that 1 month. That's July 31st.
Did we talk about, as of today, waiving all the penalties and fees that accrued, no matter what account, which is $10,000 some odd dollars, waiving those $10,000 and starting fresh in July? That's when it'll start fresh again, correct? The July bill that goes out?
What penalties do you want to waive? And again, for my office, it's really easy to waive June and July. We just don't do it.
Well, I think I'm hearing from council, they want to waive like March, April, and May. Well,
As long as they stay current with their payment.
well, now, that's different.
That was different when
I
I
heard that they wanted to waive it no matter if you stay current or not. But if you don't stay current going forward, then you're going to get penalties and
Just heard
fees.
that from one
The,
person.
the other thing, March was pretty much pre-COVID.
Because that was February or January.
Because that was January service, and the due date was March, what, 20th? So, I mean, you didn't start having closures and layoffs and stuff until pretty much
March.
at or after that
So
time.
March would be May's bill.
March service?
I don't know.
March service is May's bill.
Right.
That's right.
So what you guys are talking, what you're saying is you should just waive May and June's penalties and interest.
We're trying to avoid waiving May because it's a whole lot of work, but June and July we can do without much of a problem. But because like I said with the software, we cannot do a global push one key and undo penalties from May.
But you said May was June's water bill. And that's, I mean,
May
was,
May is July's water bill.
no, May,
May's bill, he's asking
Is
the other
March-
way
is
around. May
March's
is
water
March's service, right?
so that's when the trouble started.
But that's when they get the bill for it. But like in March, if they get laid off and they got that bill, that's when they didn't pay it, even though it's January's water. Mm-hmm. Right. That's when they physically have the bill in their hand.
Right.
And when did we pass our ordinance? In March, correct?
It was in March, right? I don't know what day, but it was March because I turned in this request on March 26th, and that was after we'd passed it.
But right now, we have over $10,000 in penalties and fines based upon non-payment of bills, let's say March, whatever it is, March, April, May. So what do I hear everybody saying what they want to do with it?
It's about 10,000 per month.
Oh, per
It,
month.
it was 9190 in March, 10,235 in April, 10,379 in May.
So you're over $30,000 if you're waiving fees and penalties. And those months, it's over $30,000. If you pick June and July, you're going to add another 10, so it'll be over $50,000 that you're waiving in penalties and fees and fines.
So we shouldn't necessarily be making money off the fact that these people couldn't pay their bills. I mean, if they're paying their bills, the water that they used, that's the goal here, right? What they actually used. And we're not sending anybody out to shut this off, so we're not paying for those people to do that.
Right?
Yeah, I agree with Eric. I think we go back to March.
Right.
You know, I
And
think
I
that.
know that's a lot of work for you guys, but, you know,
What does everybody else think? Jess?
I agree.
I agree with Eric and Bill.
Jim?
I think we have to go all the way back. It doesn't make sense to do these 2 months and not do the first 2
Right.
months.
Paul?
I didn't hear what Jim said.
He says you have to go all the way back because you can't just pick 2 months without doing the other months.
I agree, but that it should go back to the beginning, but I also think that we need to give them additional incentive besides the shut-off, and I do believe.
Well, they're going to have the incentive is if they don't pay it, they're still going to get fined going forward.
For what amount? Just the,
Water bill.
starting with July forward?
Well, you could do two things. One is they would still get the penalty on their current due bill. The second is, I mean, you talked about giving people who are on this payment plan $25. That could be conditional. I mean, we could make that's $25 towards your 12th payment, assuming that the other 11 are made on time. I mean, you could say that, and then that way we're giving them $25, but they have to make all the payments on time in order to get it.
I guess that's a compromise.
Well, I think that's fair. It gives you incentive to keep on the plan.
Yeah, it's roughly a half month.
And I understand your desire to waive out penalties for past months, but just understand we're going to have a substantial amount of time invested in that.
I understand. Well, everybody understand that?
Yes.
I do.
Everybody understands it, but maybe they don't appreciate it around this time.
How much overtime is that going to cost us?
Well, it's going to cost a lot. The complication and what makes it difficult to figure out right now is I have the numbers of accounts for each month, but I don't know how many of those are the same accounts. It's going to be a lot of them are going to be the same accounts. It's probably going to take us 10 or 15 minutes per account to go in and waive out the penalties. There were 256, like I said, for May at 15 minutes apiece. That's 64 hours of staff time to waive out all those penalties. Now, it shouldn't be that times 3 because some of them are going to be the same accounts, so we should be able to do it at the same time.
Okay.
But I don't know how many of those are going to be all the same accounts. And there were 377 accounts in April. So at a minimum, we're going to have to go into 377 different accounts, do the waiver, do the documentation, and all. I mean, it's going to be.
But the documentation is going to be a copy and paste.
It should be, and so I mean, but we're going to have to do it for each one.
Right.
Are we only
Control C, Control V.
one account?
I'm not clear on that. Vanita's question is: are we only taking it off of accounts that end up on this payment plan, or are we waiving everybody's penalties back to March?
I think we're waiving everybody.
I heard everybody saying they're waiving everybody's penalties back to March.
Even if they paid sometime in that time frame?
Even if they paid?
'Cause that's what.
Well, I mean, it's more work for us, but it doesn't make sense to me to waive penalties for people who got way off and not waive penalties
Right, I
for
agree
people who
with
are
you.
just late. I mean, if we're doing it, we're doing it. To my,
So you guys want to waive penalties for the month of March, April, May, and June?
Correct.
Yes.
But June will be easy.
June is easy, and then since we're here, if you want to do July, let's do it now because it's really easy
I don't
to
want
do
to
in
do
advance.
July. I don't think that's appropriate.
No, I don't think that's necessary.
Okay, I just want the decision now. I don't
Anybody
want
want to do July? No. So what I have is 12-month payback, no shut-offs until July 31st, after July 31st, waive penalties for March, April, May, and June. And are we going to follow Keith's recommendation that if you pay on your payment plan, you'll get $25 from the city on your final 12th payment if you make all your payments?
Or you pay it off.
Or you pay it off, you get 25 if you pay it off early. Is everybody okay with
Yes.
that?
Yes.
So
535, you threw out a bunch of different numbers before, so.
well, I say 25 is $6,250 about we're talking about. So if you want to go more, I mean, we have 2,500 that we've given away. We approved up to 25,000.
Take it out just.
But what,
Sure,
but
yeah.
what, I mean, what's realistic? I mean, you don't want to say, well, we're going to get 15,000. Everybody's free. I mean, what do you want to, what's everybody want to do?
But while I agree, we don't want to make money on a pandemic, we have to look at the monies that we're losing in this, in the form of the fines. Well, you calculated about $50,000 right there, so I think if we're paying everybody a half a month, whether you're a frequent flyer or not, I think that's fair.
You know, but we're still, I think this is what Eric said, though, we're not really, we're losing the money because we're not getting the penalties. But if the people had paid, the penalties wouldn't exist. And we did not expend any time turning off water or anything that we incurred expenses in
Except for
this.
the notices. Yeah.
What?
Right, except for the mailings.
Right. Like I said, we haven't really incurred the general cost that you would have. So when we say we're losing that money, we're just losing money that we would have gotten in, but we wouldn't have even gotten that money in had there not been the economic issues that we have.
Partly. I mean, every month we get, what's our average per month of fines, penalties and fees?
It's about this. It's about the $10,000.
So every month, even before the pandemic, we were getting about 8,000 a month in penalties. So it's part of the revenue. So it is part of the cost of doing business and the cost to help us operate,
But
so.
what do we usually do though when we get when they have those penalties? Do we turn them off? Do we turn people off that don't pay?
Yes,
Right.
but,
And so
but-
we have an employee that goes out and does that process that costs us money.
But then they pay for that
So
to turn it
it's
back
not
on.
an
But we charge for that. If we actually shut off your water, then we charge you $50 to turn it back on. So if you are late, if you get a $50 bill and you don't pay by the due date and you pay after that, we get an extra $5 because we charge $5 once you're late. If we actually shut you off, that's only if you miss 2 bills. So 50 then goes to 55, then another 50 gets added, so now it's 105, then we add 1050, then we shut you off, then we charge you a $50 charge for the reconnection.
It's a complicated process.
Understood.
So is everybody agreeable to the $25 figure, or do you want to do 0? Do you want to do 20? Do you want to do 30, 35? What does everybody feel?
I think 25 for a half a month is reasonable.
I'll agree.
Agreed.
Okay. And you agree that we want to do it as if they pay it off, they get the $25, or if they stay on the plan for the 11th month, they get $25 applied to their 12th payment?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, you got that, Keith?
Yeah, you're gonna have to define. I mean, do they have to pay everyone on time, or you have to decide that? The other thing I just want to throw out there is and it's a minor note, but we always put in these payment plans that it becomes fully payable if the account is finalized. And that's for anybody who moves.
Yes,
They need to pay it all
absolutely.
when the account goes final.
Absolutely. That'll stay the same. That won't change.
So they would have to make their payments consistently and consecutively for 11 months.
What if they're 2 days late?
Well, that comes back to late payment or missed payment.
They're gonna get a fine of $5 on their payment. Should they still get the benefit of the 25 at the end? What if they're late for the 12 months?
But if they never hit the shut-off list,
Never hit their shut-off
yeah,
list.
the bill's due Thursday and they don't get paid till Friday,
It's probably
We could
easy.
define
It's
it-
probably
that's-
easier. It's probably easier if they don't make the shut-off list. If they're late, they still get the $25. If they make their shut-off list, everything's off. Out the
Once
door.
they're shut off, they lose the 25.
They lose everything.
But as long as they avoid disconnection, they get it.
Correct.
Does that make
Sounds
sense?
fair.
Mr. Piccoli, what are your thoughts on that? All right, does that sound like a reasonable approach to solving some of the issues that we had? Does everybody on
I-
council agree with that kind of approach? Mayor, are you okay with that? Okay, so,
We have to vote on that? How's this work?
yeah, we have to vote on that, so what we're gonna need, the motion would be, we're gonna have a payback of 12 consecutive months, beginning, I guess it would be the month of, do we want to start the payback on August 1st, I take it then? Is that when the paybacks will start, August 1st? Because that's when.
Right, because if we're suspending shutoffs till July 31st, we will, after the July due date, send a shutoff notice with the verbiage, and I will bring that to you for the meeting on July 13th, your next meeting, with what verbiage we're going to put once
Okay.
we get this ordinance. And then we will send a shutoff notice July, whatever that
Okay.
day, that comes to 20-something, that says we are actually shutting off in August, here's the date, contact us, and so on. What do you have, Anita?
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly, because I'm thinking you might not understand, out of the delinquency accounts, each month, that penalty amount, that's the 10% of whatever's late, is more than those late accounts. So some people were late, like you were saying, 2 days, they paid $3.59 on their penalty. The people who are late, that is generally what we're talking about here, I feel passionately that we should give those people the benefit, but those who were a couple of days late, due to the amount of time, it's going to be more than 268 accounts that we go in and adjust off, because the $9,190 was more than 268 accounts. So I just want to make sure your understanding of that.
I understand, but how do you tell somebody, well, you were 1 day late, you don't pay for another 10 days and you get a benefit? I mean, that's bad for us. Because that's
I'm just
that's
saying,
giving an
in this
incentive so people to be
particular
really late.
instance, and generally, most of these people who have followed this pattern have followed it because of the situation, not because that they were just a few days late and they missed.
I thought you were going to ask the question, what if during this period of March, April, May, they were late, but then they paid the late fees? Do they get reimbursed? I don't know.
That's what I'm asking.
That'd be a credit. I mean, if you're waiving them, that'd just be a
Yeah,
credit.
they would have a credit on their account. We couldn't issue checks for all those people.
Does everybody understand that?
Yes.
Yes.
They understand it.
I just want to make sure you understand that it's going to take longer than the period of time, because we're dealing with more accounts than delinquent accounts.
It sounds like you're correct. It could be, and what number did you say that would be? That's to the 286 accounts that you're talking about?
Well, no.
Or more.
March, April, May, and June that we have, and July now that we have, or June that we have numbers for, vary between 268 and 377 accounts each month. So some of those, as Keith indicated, would be accounts that were similar each month. So we
Right.
would go into one account and do 3 or 4 adjustments. But those that had paid, but paid after, not on the delinquency journal, not on the shut-off list, would still be receiving a benefit from this council action.
Well, I get it. No good deed goes unpunished. I get it. Because we're trying to help out, but it's going to cause bigger issues.
Well, it's going to cost longer, and, I just know from a standpoint of man hours, I'm more than willing to go the distance for the delinquent accounts, but I just think the benefit to people who just forgot or went on vacation or whatever they did, They paid their bill. I don't think we should have to forgive that.
But how hard is it to determine who those people
Oh,
are?
real easy, because we have our delinquency journal that just shows exactly who's on it.
What do people think about that? Because of course, some people, they get a fine because I forgot to put it in the mail.
Yeah.
So should they get waived?
That makes sense.
They were perfectly healthy, they had their jobs and everything, but they had the old-timers disease. Yeah.
How do we know?
Good point.
Yeah, we got a 3-month period here. Why?
Well, she says she can weed those, she has a list that you can tell who those people are.
You're,
Well, they
you're telling me
already
that
paid,
there's a
didn't they?
list that you know that somebody was on vacation or that they have a job and we're just late anyway? I don't know how, I think we talked about this last time. We either do it for everybody, we do it regardless of the situation, or we don't do it at all.
Well, what she's saying is that most people who are late, they pay within a few days, and they pay the penalty on top of it, because it's only like $3 or whatever. So there's maybe a group of people, maybe 25% of the people are like that, and they have the money, there's no issues, they just, I forgot to mail it in, and then they just pay it, and it's over.
How do you know that? How do you know that, though?
Because
If
they
they're
pay
3
it.
days late. How do you know
they
that
paid-
they didn't get the money 3 days later?
They
How do you know they weren't out of money and they just got, somebody gave them money or they came in and paid it? How do you?
Usually those people call you, don't they, or no?
Some do, sure, some do. Yeah, some
I don't think you can do it, I don't think you can,
I'm not in a position to judge or to be the person to make those decisions by all means, and nor any of you. I just think that when you're looking at across the board, generally speaking, we have from month to month without COVID, $9,000 to $10,000 of penalties. That's just the way it is. That's, as you say, it's kind of the cost of doing business. The delinquent accounts, this is a special time. So I really think it's important to try to identify for those people who were going to be shut off. And I'm sure some of them are carryover from month to month.
well, we can't draft legislation that's going to cover everybody, because we didn't even ask the question, because we're all thinking and assuming here we're talking about residential accounts, but we're not all talking about residential accounts.
Accounts too.
There's business
We're
accounts on
talking
here, too.
commercial accounts on this too.
But, I mean, you've got commercial accounts who are in a similar situation. I mean, just like a resident who can't pay because they got laid off, you got restaurants who can't pay because they had to
Right.
close. I mean, it's not,
Again, we're looking at, of those 268 in March, 11 were M accounts or business accounts. 10 accounts in April, 16 accounts in May. Not that many.
Right.
And again, I'm not here to judge, I'm just mentioning as a comparison. The predominant ones are residents, our community, the people who vote for you all.
Well, I guess I mean, that's probably an idea, but we want to do a fair and equitable solution to the problem. We may not catch everybody, but we want to do the best we can from the information we have. Now, Bill's on an idea that everybody gets waived. Does everybody agree with that, or do you want?
Let me ask you a question before I
Yes,
answer
Paul.
that. On those people who forgot to pay the bill, they're typically on that list once, correct?
They're not, they're
Like-
just
like-
on a penalty list.
Right, they're on the penalty list, they pay the penalty once, and then next month they're pay on time,
Yeah.
typically. So by that algorithm, you could pretty much tell those people who were just late or whatever for that month, as opposed to somebody that has got a problem. Okay.
So, do people agree with the concept of waiving it no matter what? How many are in favor of just doing that?
Me?
Okay,
I think that's where I'm at.
4.
you got your
Okay.
votes.
And we got 3. Okay, so they win. So
I like
okay, it
it.
sounds like you're going to waive everybody, and so it may be a little bit more work to do that. So we got 12-month payment plan. It starts. The payment plan starts August 1st. We have no shut-offs until after July 31st. We have waived penalties for March, April, May, and June for everybody. Period. No matter, and give them credits if they paid the penalties. And fourth, they get $25 credit towards their water consumption if they follow the payment plan, and the last month of their payment plan, they get the $25 credit.
As long as they're not disconnected with.
As long as they're not disconnected, right? Is that, everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Yes.
So is there a motion for that?
Move to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for all the hard work you're going to do.
Yeah, sincerely, thank you. I know that it is not going to be that fun, so.
And Keith, can you talk about now
So is your lunch.
the tax thing that's going to be on council, so you can put that on there?
Okay. The tax budgets I emailed out to you on Friday. This, it's kind of an anachronism in the state budget process, but it's the start of their, where they get their revenue estimate, because our budget has to be within their revenue estimate. There's not a lot of changes. I get the figures in this out of the 5-year plan. Since the 5-year plan is in process of being updated, I use the old one because I don't have a full one for the new one. The big change probably to point out is that the ambulance levy is going to bring in significantly more money because we have the increase which takes effect for the 2021 collections.
And this is going to be on council with the emergency clause. It's not listed on the agenda, but it should have been, so we're just addressing it now.
Right.
Anybody have any questions on that?
No.
Paul?
Keith, with the ambulance thing, when do we start collecting on that?
2021.
2021, and is the millage would remain the same at 2.2?
Yeah, no, I should have changed that. It should be 3.2.
3.2.
And I will fix that.
Okay, is there a motion as amended with the emergency clause?
Move to approve as amended with the emergency clause.
Second, including emergency clause.
Any further questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 2131, increase PO 2571 Goodyear tire for sanitation. Nino?
Thank you, Mr. President. So we started the year with a $15,000 PO with Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company on sanitation, respectfully asking council to increase this by $30,000 to a new total of $45,000. We talked a little bit in the budget. Steer tires are $450. Those are the front tires. They'll last about a year. The rear tires, we use recaps. They're $152. There's 8 of them, and it lasts about 6 months. Thank you.
Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 2132, expenditure over $15,000 for Drug Mart JCG payments. Mrs. Marshall?
Thank you, Mr. President. This request is for payment to Discount Drug Mart on their job creation grant agreements. The 3 projects were the call center project, the Gentry Health project, and the Hastings acquisition project. These 3 grants had a payroll commitment of $3,145,797 total, and their actual payroll verified by Rita is $4,694,146. So they have actually exceeded their payroll obligations as well as the job creation obligations. And so for the call center, the anticipated jobs were 26. They're at 37 full-time and 2 part-times. And then for the Gentry Health, they had anticipated 26 new jobs. They're actually at 31 full-time jobs. And then for Hastings Acquisition, which was the durable medical equipment company that they acquired, that was 31 new jobs was the anticipation. They're actually at 39 full-time and 5 part-time. And so we respectfully request payment to them.
Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 2133, CARES Act funding resolution. Keith?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is, OML sent this to us, the mayor forwarded it on. It's an ordinance we have to pass that's going to just say that we're going to spend the CARES Act funding that we're going to apply for on things we're allowed to spend it on. But
Right. Any questions on that?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second, including emergency clause.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 2134, refinancing existing debt and possible new debt issue. Keith, you got to be quick on this because we're got a lot more to go, but we're going to have meetings on this. So
I understand. There's a lot of information here. I sent you, I realize I put a lot in front of you. Debt is a complex process. So I guess I put everything in front of you. I don't need to read it to you, I guess. If you have questions, what do you have? And we'll go from there.
And this is, we're going to talk about this probably at a budget meeting when we do the LST or EMS budget. We're going to talk about the options that we can have and what option do we want to pick to do the refinancing of our existing debt based upon the callability of some of the bonds and all that fun stuff. So anybody have any questions on that yet? All right, Keith, thanks. We'll be back to that one.
Okay.
2135, resolution against racism. This came to me. Pam Miller sent me a few emails. There's a lot of issues going on, especially what has been occurring around the country. I know that the city has done many different items and continues to do many different things with respect to diversity and racism. And I believe Pam's involved and the city's involved in a committee that deals with the issue of racism in Medina County. And we have our own police department has procedures. I think everybody received an email talking about the protocols that they're involved with. So we're actively addressing it. It's not like the city of Medina does nothing with respect to the issue, because we are aware of the issue. We've been aware of the issue. We are taking steps to address the issue. The question is, are we taking enough steps? I don't know if there's ever an answer to that question. Probably the answer is no. You can never do enough, because if it still exists, that means more needs to be done. So the question is, do we want to have a resolution just acknowledging again what we do as a city to address the issue of racism in our city, and how that we want to continue to strive to be better as a city in addressing the issues of racism? I mean, I don't know. What is everybody's thoughts on that? Jess?
I think that people make New Year's resolutions every year because they want to continue to grow. So passing a resolution against racism does not speak to us doing a poor job thus far. It just speaks to the fact that we want to grow in our understanding of the issue, and we will continue to strive to do our best.
Mr. President,
Paul?
some time ago, we passed a resolution similar to this, maybe not quite as specific to this. Why don't we take that resolution, review that, and maybe we can adjust some of the words to it. It's already in existence, and update it.
Well, yeah, and I think some of the resolutions that have been passed, been talking about forming committees and stuff. I think we already have a committee. I don't know why I don't know why we'd form another one. I mean, we have a lot of committees.
What was in the packet. I'm talking about the resolution that we passed several years ago as a city with regard to equality and diversity and things like that.
Oh, I hear what you're saying. Okay.
Take that resolution.
But I think we need to highlight it again as a city. I think it's important to acknowledge, hey, we don't support it. We don't think anybody should support it. Get it back on top of mind so people keep thinking about it and keep moving forward to address the issue as best as possible. I mean, what does everybody else think about that?
I
Jim?
agree. I think so too, John. I don't know that I saw what we wanted to do in these samples here.
Okay.
But Paul has a good idea too, whether we take that one and then combine it with some of these things. And I don't know, Kathy, if any of the other clerks have shared with you.
Had some examples. There were some examples in there.
What?
Oh,
What'd you say?
That's where you got, these were from other clerks?
yeah, I got a few. I could check and see if there's any more.
Okay, Bill?
You could read to me the resolution that Paul's talking about.
I don't have the resolution in front of me.
I don't have it in front of me, but it was several years
Do
ago.
we have one, Kathy?
We did pass one. I remember doing it.
Yeah, that's good, but
I don't
I'd like
remember-
to see what's in
That's
it.
the whole point. We
Yeah,
don't
that's what I was
remember
saying.
what
We
it
could
is.
update that.
What?
That's the whole point. We don't remember what it. We should
It was,
know what it is,
Let's
but
pull it out, review it, and update it.
regarding-
as
that's the whole issue.
Well, you know, Pam Miller's here. Maybe she can
Yes,
comment
Pam.
on this.
Do you have stuff to add? Can you talk to the microphone? Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Council President. Pam Miller, 450 Woodland Drive, Medina. What I'm suggesting that council do is more than just the resolution that you passed a few years ago, which was in support of diversity, and it emphasized that the city would, in hiring and promoting, would be open to diversity and would not discriminate against any of the protected classes. But this time, what I would like to suggest that the council do is to pass a resolution declaring racism a public health issue, which is what the leading cities and surrounding counties have done, Cleveland, Akron, Canton, Columbus. And the reason for that is that systemic racism is something that affects people of color in all aspects of their lives. It affects them from education to housing to job opportunities, health care, the fear of police violence. COVID-19 has really emphasized that in drastic terms because I think that people of color, actually African Americans, are 3 times more likely to get COVID because of all the other issues in their lives. And the stress of living with chronic racism is something that takes a toll on the health and mental health of Black Americans. So even though we're a city that's about 95% white, I think that we, people say, why should we even be that concerned? We don't have these big problems in Medina. But the better question, really, I think, is why wouldn't Medina, as the county seat, want to be a leader in saying that we won't tolerate racism or we won't tolerate disparities in our community that are a direct result of systemic racism? And so the real questions are to start asking, to bring people together and start asking people, those who are affected in our community, about how they're affected by racism. Are Black people disproportionately stopped by the police? Are Black people disproportionately charged with drug crimes? Why are there disproportionately more children of color in juvenile detention? Why were the census tracts in Medina County with the highest poverty and the highest number of African Americans probably hit hardest by COVID? How can we attract Black-owned businesses to Medina? Why can't we attract a more diverse workforce? And shouldn't we call the county fair board and ask them to ban the sale of Confederate flags? Are we continuing to provide and require anti-bias and sensitivity training for all of our employees as well as our police department on a regular, ongoing basis every single year, and more often if necessary? And what are the kinds of policies and institutional barriers that are getting in the way of economic inclusion? So I think you can see that young people in Medina have recognized that racism exists. They've started an equity roundtable at the high school, and the school board and the administration is fully behind that because kids say, yes, racism exists. There are slurs, there are things that people do on a constant basis that make it uncomfortable for people of different races in our community. So I think it's time to take a stand, to recognize the sad history of our country. And you can be leaders, you can be intentional about this, you can adopt a resolution that declares racism a public issue and commits you to working with the many organizations and agencies, the schools, et cetera, in our community who are working on this as well. It's not asking you to form some kind of a new committee, but to be open to the idea of being involved.
I understand. I think I would assume we are involved. I remember a couple of years ago we talked about, I think Chief Baraducci was on the committee, and I think isn't the diversity committee that you're on countywide addressing these issues throughout the county too? Or is that what your goal is?
So
with your
the
committee?
Medina Diversity Project it's a grassroots organization. We're not a nonprofit. We really are more focused on Medina, the city, because that's where we are and because we're small. But we're interested in branching out beyond the city as much as we can, so that, I would like to say that our ultimate goals are countywide. But we are just basically a citizen group, and we don't have any resources, but we work with other organizations, and we would like to work with the city as well.
No, understood. I guess the question is, now we're getting more complicated. I mean, I don't know, we probably have to talk about this at another meeting and get more input if you want to. I mean, I don't know what we do. I mean, I don't understand what it means to be a public health emergency. I mean, is it a public issue? Absolutely. But I don't know how the health department or what that means. I didn't read up on it. I don't know. I just don't know. And I don't know what other people think about that on council.
Well, one thing I think about it is we have a tendency to, obviously, we have a tendency to minimize, these issues. And the issue about it being a health emergency is that, as Pam explained, thank you, is that it isn't just one simple thing. It isn't simply, this part of life or that part of life. It includes all these complications that come together into people's lives that make this an emergency. As Pam explained, whether you're more likely to get COVID, and why is that? It is because you are in poor health condition. Why are you in poor health condition? Because you don't have access as we do, as I do. I don't have access to these to hospitals, or I don't have access to a doctor. I can't afford to do that, and it plays out in every aspect of people's lives. That's why other communities have passed this. We took a leadership role with LGBTQ legislation that was Supreme Court decision that didn't go as far as what we passed. And one question somebody asked me that I thought was a pretty ridiculous question, but it was a question. Someone I know said to me, well, how many people do you have in Medina that are LGBTQ? As if that issue would only be addressed if the numbers said we needed to address it. So as Pam said, yeah, we're 95% white. We don't have a diverse population, but we do have diversity in this city that we need to look at all the issues that impact negatively on their life and see what we can do to help them. We are not a great example at City Hall, not through anybody's specific fault, but there has only ever been one person of color in 200 years on City Council. There has only been 12 women in 200 years on City Council. There has only ever been one person of color who worked in City Hall in 200 years. So I think that, this is a pretty simple thing to ask. A lot of communities have done it. It wouldn't take long for us to adapt something similar for us that we can take a look at and we can pass to speak to these issues that have been raised.
So are you saying that between the next 3 weeks, would you work on something of that? I mean, you're a special legislation committee.
Sure.
I mean, I guess that's the question. I mean, is that everybody? I mean, because we just got this, and usually my approach is I usually like to go through and think about things and make sure we ask all the right questions before you vote on something. But I mean, that may give us time to do it. And if it's not enough time, I mean, we can always go into August. I mean, as long as we address it, I guess is the question. Because I think that I don't want to do a knee-jerk reaction because I want to give it the proper due respect of review and make sure that we ask the questions of who we ever have to ask the questions to.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, does that make sense, everybody? Yep. Any questions? Okay, so Phil's in charge. All right, thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
Okay. 2136, 2020 codification and updated ordinance. That's just our codification of our ordinances.
Just our annual update.
Yeah. Questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 2137 MCRC Summer Special Membership Sales Extension. Mr. Wright?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a temporary for this year because of COVID. We just want to extend the summer memberships to August, September, October due to the fact that we're not selling day passes. People have been joining to use the facility, so it's working out to our advantage. We'd like to extend that. Once they do join for a 3-month summer membership, it does come off a yearly membership if they want to join. Thank you.
Questions?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second, including the emergency clause?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 2138 Grant Application Municipal Airport Obstruction Removal Study. Patrick?
Thank you. Every year we get $150,000 set aside from the FAA for the airport. This year we would like to use it to do an obstruction removal study. This is required by the FAA. The grant that we're asking you to authorize us to apply for will pay for 100% of the cost of this study.
And how much is the cost of the study?
It's $150,000.
Well, the question is, a lot of other issues are at the airport. I mean, is this the most important thing that we have to have at the airport at this time, or is there other things that we should be using $150,000 for?
This is the
Mr.
on our
Huber?
priority.
Right now, at the airport, the west approach on the runway for an ILS approach has been shut down by the FAA because of the height of trees. So if you're on a glide slope approaching that runway, this is the west edge of the runway, you're on a prescribed flight path, and there's enough penetration of that flight path by the height of trees that the FAA shut down that approach. And in order to start the process of figuring out what trees got to be trimmed or cut, they go through a rather complicated obstruction removal study. Once they identify what has to be done, then the work has to be done to trim the tree or try to adjust the flight path or glide path. So it's a present difficulty at this time. That ILS approach has been shut down by the FAA, and this is an immediate concern, especially if you're flying at night. And for that reason, it has been elevated to a top priority.
And $150,000 is just for the study, or is it to the study and the removal of the trees?
My understanding is it's just a study.
That's correct.
150,000?
That's correct.
I could go out there and point some trees. Just put them all down.
That's a tall tree.
I mean, I guess I understand, but
The
once we-
complexity in part has to do with it. Some of these trees are not owned by the city of Medina, so we're looking at going to a number of property owners and asking them to either cut their tree or trim it. And that may be a problem, so the more complicated part of this study involves what to do about this ILS glide path and how to adjust it in the FAA system to make it work.
So we spend $150,000 to come back to you got to clear these trees. What if it costs $250,000 to clear the trees? Where's that money coming from?
I believe that would be eligible as well in
Correct.
fiscal year.
Well, you have to wait another year and use that 150 that we get the next year to cut down the trees.
That may be.
Sounds like a unique situation. Any questions on that?
No.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Delta 2139 Delta Airport Task 5 Obstruction Study. This is the same thing, I would imagine, correct?
This is the same thing. This is authorizing Delta as our consultant to complete that study.
Move to approve
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Emergency clause, please.
with the emergency clause.
My second includes the emergency clause.
All in favor with the emergency clause?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 2140 Railroad Emergency Repair Then and Now. Patrick?
About 2 weeks ago, we had a emergency railroad. We had actually a derailment. So we had our emergency responder, the Wintro, come out and repair it. It was about $7,000. Had to be done immediately, and this is to get them paid.
Questions?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second including emergency clause.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 2141 Accept donations to keep Memorial Pool open. Mr. Wright?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is just to be able to accept the donations to open the pool this year. Thank you.
And Keith, did you get the number?
I did. You asked for it. We have $30 was deposited, and we have $2,600 in 15 checks in the vault that we are ready to deposit, assuming that you accept this.
And my understanding is we have members here from the community that raised the $20,000, is my understanding, to reopen the pool. The question is, we have the $20,000 to reopen it. As we know from Mr. Wright indicating to us it's $1,000 a day to have it open. And of course, there may be other people who come to the pool to raise money. So the question is, do we open the pool and see how much money we get and keep it open as long as possible with the money that we can generate? Because I don't think he has really no carry forward funds to keep it open, because the rec center is losing $1.2 million because of the COVID thing. And I guess I'd like to keep it open as long as possible. And, you know, if we get some more people going to the pool that can generate additional revenues, we can keep it open longer than 20 days. Is that correct, Mr. Wright?
Correct. So ideally, the rec center, looking at the last 3 weeks of numbers, has brought back 29% of the members to use the pool, to use the rec center. If you look at that in aspect to the outdoor pool, out of an average of 120 or 152 average per day, that would be less than 50. So at that rate, we would lose about $42,000 if we continued to run at that rate of only less than 50 people showing up. So ideally, the donations that we accept would be days open. So if we received $20,000 in donations, ideally we can open for 20 days, and hopefully the revenues will build and we can continue to stay open through the summer. What people don't realize is the budget of the pool and the rec center are enterprise funds. Just because there's a 5-year budget and that money was approved in a budget, that's still revenue that has to be generated to cover that budget that year. It's not money already sitting in a fund for 5 years waiting to use it each year. Same thing with the rec center. It's revenues generated that year that we use for those expenses.
And I think you mentioned that we've only, like the last couple of years, we were pretty much on budget. We lost about $1,000. That's all. It was $80,000 we spent to have the pool open during the summer, and we raised $79,000.
That's correct. And even that's with some expenses that were unpredictable.
Which is pretty good.
Yep. We did really well.
No, that's pretty good. Thoughts?
Mr. President, I have some verbal commitments from a couple of organizations that once we get the pool up and running, that when they get their groups in, they will be able to add to the donations.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
So,
Good.
but they want to see the pool up and running first.
Good news. Bill?
So, explain this to me. I guess I didn't. It's not quite clear to me. So we have raised already $20,000 has been raised. Is
Yes.
that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
And Tom, if you want to give an update on that,
Okay.
I think Mr. Bora.
Thank you very much. Tom Moore, I'm from United Breakfast Kiwanis, but I'm also a township president. I raised the question to the mayor in a virtual meeting 12 days ago. That you folks had a meeting and indicated that you needed $20,000 in funds to have the pool open for the year. So we asked.
His mic.
Can you press the button in front of your mic there? Thank you.
I'm not used to all this technology, sorry. He turned it off, see? I'm sorry. Do I have to repeat all that?
I heard it. You can go ahead.
Well, I didn't know about the... Anyway, our goal was to raise $20,000, and Mayor gave us a week. With the help of Deborah and other members, some of the people are in here, and other folks in the community, we have commitments for 20. It's going to 3 different buckets, so Keith's got some of it, Deborah's got some of it. Our Kiwanis clubs still have to write the checks, but we have the commitment. And we didn't stop, but that's what we were asked to do, and that's what we're making available.
No, that's great. I mean, at least we can get this up and running, and I'm pretty confident that if you get more funds that Paul's talking about, and we get more funds with the use of the pool, I mean, the goal would be, and hopefully the lifeguards will still be available, to keep it operating as long as possible. But Bill, does that answer your question?
No. Actually, I mean, it was good. I mean, yes. So there's $20,000 in the coming in, or you've committed to $20,000. My understanding when we talked about this was that it takes 2 weeks or so to get the pool ready. Correct? Have you started to get the pool ready?
No, that'll be tonight. If
Okay.
you say yes, I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning and
Okay.
start to get the pool ready.
And then there is a cost to get the pool ready.
Absolutely.
For a couple of weeks. So I guess the part that wasn't clear to me was, if we're going to go ahead and go to the process of setting it up and getting the pool ready to go, then clearly we're not going to close down in 20 days. I mean, that wouldn't be a realistic thing to do. I think we need to make sure that we have some idea and we'd want to have a commitment that if we're going to go forward with it, that we can carry on until we usually close at the end of the season, which I'm not sure now when that is, the end of August or whatever. I mean, does anybody...
I disagree a little bit. I think the opening the pool and making it available as much as possible is the ultimate goal. And we can keep it open as long as possible. That'll be great, because people evidently want it open. They donated their money. I mean, I don't know where we come up with the extra 25,000 to keep it open for another 30 days. I mean, where's that money coming from?
I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying that they're realistically, if we're going to go through the process, Mike, do we have lifeguards that we hire will have specifically to work at the pool?
We use the lifeguards for the rec center. That's why it was put under the rec center account.
Right,
So we can use it
right.
in the pool
So
manager.
if in fact we open the pool and then close the pool in 20 days, would all those lifeguards still go back and have a job at the rec center?
Yes.
Okay.
But I also think that it's really not just 20 days. From talking to Mike earlier today, he feels there's going to be generation of revenue. So there should be no issue getting at least a month. That's my understanding. I mean, there should hopefully be no issue for a month.
Yeah, right. Pending that everybody shows up that, wants to use the pool and saying they want to use the pool, and,
So that'll get us through the first week of August, because they can't open up until July 6th.
The other thing that we have in depth, I'm just one more second and I'll be done. But the other thing we have then, I think we have also the money that we set aside. We have the COVID money that we set aside, that we're putting some of it toward the water bill.
Some of it. Yes. Right.
Which would leave us, we'd still have some of that money that we could extend to the pool. I mean, in order to keep
That's correct. You could, yes.
pool open.
I don't think that qualifies for COVID money. It's not a pandemic issue that a swimming pool can't be open.
That is correct also.
Well, out of fairness, the pool wasn't open because of the COVID
Right, I was
and
gonna
the
say,
health
why
department
wouldn't that be
regulations. So
considered?
it is,
A pool is a privilege, not a necessity.
well, a lot of things in the city aren't a necessity. I mean, we're talking about trying to have something available for some of the youth that can't go to the rec center, they can't play basketball this year. It's trying to give them some outlet.
I think that the question would be, let's get it open, see how long we keep it open, and we come a week or two ahead of time to figure out where we stand. Then we can make this decision. I don't think we're going to be able to make this decision tonight.
We also, though, discussed, I thought we had a discussion about other foundations that would possibly, there was.
Yeah, Paul mentioned he has a couple that are willing to donate once the pool's open.
And the Stevenson Foundation is included in a portion of the 20,000.
That's in that pool, okay.
If I could just comment, Deborah
Yes.
Halleck, 1100 North Jefferson Street, Unit D. I've inherited the memorial pool as part of the Kiwanis and my dad's legacy to Medina. So I'm here today to talk to you all about the pool. How do we get it open? Can we get it open? And in all fairness, I think I should just say that we really look forward to being able to raise the funds with the community, individuals. People drove up in my driveway today handing me money. But we didn't open it up with the limitations that it'd be closed in 20 days. And so I think that would be a difficult report back to the community. And I wouldn't feel comfortable, I think, moving forward with that kind of understanding. So if we could have the further discussion now tonight, I think that would be helpful.
Well, I guess that's a good question. I mean, I don't think the city can afford to open it up and pay for it. I don't know where that, do you have that money in your budget there? Because that's where it'd have to come from.
Not in the pool budget.
So, I mean, that's a good
I mean,
question.
I agree with what Deb just said, though. I mean, if you're putting in if you're putting in $20,000, and then you possibly due to weather or folks not coming in the numbers you want, $1,000 a day is donated, and in 20 days you're going to close down. That to me seems like a non-starter.
Well, again, I know we were throwing 20 days up, but I think it's pretty much guaranteed for 30. I think we can obligate 30 days.
Based on what?
Based upon his experience of who's going to come to the pool, how much money will be raised, previous years opening the pool, how much revenue is generated. There's going to be revenue generated. It's not going to be zero.
I don't think you can count on that because we've never been through an experience like the pandemic, so we don't really know. I mean, we're like a restaurant. We have no idea how many people will decide that it's safe and there's social distancing at a pool, and so I'm going to allow my 13, 14-year-old kids to go. I'm not sure that you can just say, yeah, I think we can do it for 30 days. I think it sounds more like you don't know what the weather's going to, all these things conspire to make that not work.
There's a lot of things that can factor in. I can tell you, and maybe it's just because it's in my ward, I've received numerous calls, numerous emails, and pleading with the pool reopening. And again, I disagree with Jess when she says that the money that we approved on her appropriation wouldn't fit into those guidelines. I would have to disagree, but that would have to be something that Mr. Huber would have to discuss. I think my goal is to get the pool open, and I would doubt very seriously, maybe the rec center, Mike, I understand, maybe the rec center, because it is summer and it's normally lower, even though you've got numbers from last June, it's lower participation in the month of June. But if the weather permits, being outside, I think that, I don't think we're going to have a problem. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but if the weather's permitting, I don't think that we're going to have a problem of generating revenue to keep it open. If it doesn't generate the revenue that we hope, then we can discuss and maybe get a vote on the remaining members of council that would agree to using some of those funds to keep the pool running. But Tom, I appreciate you and Deborah and everybody else's efforts and all the people that have made the kind donations. We wish we had the funds that you didn't have to do that, but unfortunately, the recreation center and Mike's budget has really taken a huge hit. So we appreciate everything that you guys done, and we're going to keep that pool open as long as we possibly can.
Mayor?
Thank you.
So out of fairness to Deborah and Tom, the 20 days never came up until tonight.
No.
So our goal was, when I talked to Mike and he said if we can come up with $20,000, was even if the rec center had to support this as a service for this year because of the COVID, to make it available, that we would run it from July 6th until whenever the normal close would be, which is generally when the children go back to school, which is still undetermined at this point, whether it's going to be mid-August or the end of August. So I'd respectfully ask the council, if we have to use the carry forward from the rec center to get us through that last gap, if we can help assist with some of the COVID, and the rest of the council is okay with that, and Mr. Huber agrees it can be used for that. If not, and that money isn't spent and goes back into the kitty, you could probably reappropriate it then for that. I believe it's general fund money, so.
So you okay with that, Mike?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's totally up to you guys. It's $1,000 a day.
Well, it's
You
your
know how much
money.
it costs to
I
operate
mean,
it.
you're gonna using your carry forward, and
That's why you put it under the rec center budget.
All right, just want to make sure you're okay with that.
And it sounds like that's where Bill and I and Denny are at, that if we open this, it's got to be open for the whole season.
Well, the whole season, the season's changing now. The season's generally like August 15th.
Doesn't it
the whole season now?
reduce hours, Mike? When school starts, it doesn't close completely. It just reduces hours.
Right, we go to 4 to 7. Yeah, and it's
Right.
dead. Like, there's nobody in there after that.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's the question, because if it changes, the school doesn't open until September, where you just change the game plan. It's just.
Well, if school doesn't open, though, we'd leave it open the normal hours because you'd have kids still wanting to go in August and swim.
What if school doesn't open in September?
We'll deal with the what if later.
Yeah.
I don't.
Through Labor Day.
Just one thing.
School's starting one way or the other, John. I just don't know what form it's going to be.
One thing that does happen
We
is
just let the cat out.
Well, and the further the year goes, the colder it gets. So, I mean, there's going to be a time when we have to,
Yeah.
Yeah, usually
stop.
October, yeah.
and the lifeguards do go back to college, a lot of them, but we'll make it work.
Okay, is everybody okay
All
with
I'm
that?
saying is July and August, I expected the pool to be open here.
Yes.
Okay, so you're okay. Okay, so we have the donation of $20,000, and then we have the carry forward funds using to pay for the rest of that, so everybody understands what's happening.
Yes.
Okay.
The only other
and some
thing
COVID if you're willing.
Well, we could talk about that later.
The only other
we
thing
have
I'd
2
like-
minutes before council starts, and we have 3 more resolutions.
Well, the only other thing I'd like is and I'm sure the council members might like this as well, is my concern that I expressed to the mayor when I met with him about the ability to keep it safe and social distancing, and to have young people, lifeguards, having to deal with other people that might not be social distancing. I'd like to get an occasional update from you as you open the pool and see how that's all working out. Aside from the numbers that come in and the money, so that if we do it, that we're pretty sure that we're doing it as safely as we can.
Well, the good thing
Absolutely.
is they have to sign a release to get in, so at least we get some protection as a city that if somebody gets sick, we're not going to get sued.
Well, I just don't want anybody to get sick. I mean,
I don't either, but I mean,
Right, 'cause that could cause a shutdown.
You don't want to get in trouble at all. Yes, Jess?
2 points. So number 1, you have to be 13 or older to come to the pool without an adult, correct?
It's actually 11 and older, but we've set the age restriction at the rec center at 16, so we'll have to reduce that back to when we open it in that phase.
Okay, so who is responsible for signing that waiver then? The 11-year-old?
No, the parents have to first,
The
and that's how the
parents have to
child
come and
waivers.
sign that, okay.
Yeah, through the law department, that's how it's
Then
set
my
up.
second point that I just want to make clear, I am not a thief of children's joy. I am not trying to steal their pool experience. But when I was elected to represent Ward 1. And Ward 1 thus far, I have received 1 letter about the pool. Right now, during a COVID situation, I'm receiving letters about finding housing, about paying bills, things like that. So please understand that is where my perspective is coming from, and is no way meant to reflect that I don't want the pool to open, because I do. I think that the children deserve the pool, but in my ward specifically, those are not the issues that I am being contacted about.
Understood. Any other question from council?
Just a thank you to Deborah and Tom, and I'll make a motion with the emergency clause to accept the $20,000 donation.
Second, including emergency clause?
Wait, you don't want that to be limited to the $20,000 because we have,
Okay.
you just want to accept
Accept
donations
donations.
generally.
Accept all donations up to $1 million, right?
That's safe.
Up to whatever we get.
Okay. Oh, okay. That sounds good. Any other questions on that? Mike, you're on board with. I know it's affecting your carry forward, and that kind of gets me nervous, but it's not my department.
If I can just take a minute. So, letter of the editor, there was a statement in there about funds and withholding funds or not accepting checks. Just so everybody knows that I was the third person to donate out of my pocket $500 to the pool opening. If anybody thinks I wasn't wanting the pool to open, you're incorrect. I absolutely want the pool to open. The pool manager's on board, and that's what we want to do. Thank you.
No, I understand, and also about finances. I mean, it's complicated. There's a lot of services that need to be addressed, and we try to do the best we can to do that. And that's why we have carry forward funds, and we try to be really responsible because we know we're going to lose money. We're losing millions of dollars because of this COVID, and what are we going to do about it? And the worst thing to do about it is to go back to the taxpayer and say, hey, give us some more money. And that's what we're trying to avoid, of course, is not to do that. So that's why I'm a little nervous about the situation. As long as and I know the carry forward funds are going to be used for something else, so something in the future is going to have to be eliminated in order for this to occur. So that's really what's going to have to happen here. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're going to continue with finance and go right into council. Hopefully everybody understands that who is watching
Thank you.
on TV so that we can just keep going and get this done. 2142 MCRC partnership, partner marketing contract extension.
It's mine.
Mr. Wright?
Thank you, Mr. President. So the partner marketing contract allows for a 3-year extension. We missed it with COVID, so we didn't get to extend the contract. After talking with the schools, we want to go with a 1-year extension approved by the law department and recommended by the Rec Advisory Board, purposely so we can have time to review how the sponsorship's doing and if it needs any changes. Thank you.
Any questions?
No, I'll abstain again because this affects my employer.
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Motion carries. 2143 bids for project 947 Medina Municipal Airport Detention Basin. Is this Mr. Huber?
Mr. President.
Oh, Mayor.
So Mr. Huber and I met with members of the Stevenson Foundation and asked for their help with this $152,000 expense. This detention basin is necessary. It was promised before the last hangar was built, and for future hangars to be built and or improved, we're required to do this detention basin. So the foundation graciously approved paying up to a third, or $50,753, and with the understanding that council, unless we could find any other grants, and so far we haven't, would do the remaining 66.7%, which is right in the area of $101,507. So we're asking for the council to commit to the remainder.
And what department's that coming from?
General.
So gentlemen, and so, I mean, this has been on the radar for years. Again, if we use it for this, it'll have to, something else will have to be, deleted out of the projects that would need to be done. So it'll come out of a general administration. Thoughts? Mr. Lamb, you have your mask off.
I'm just trying to breathe. Yeah, I don't know. To me, it's an interesting thought. I mean, we just got done taking donations from people to open the pool. It's a big expenditure.
Yes, it is.
And what if we don't do it?
Yeah, I guess, or delay it. I guess that's the question.
Yeah.
We need to.
If we don't do it or delay it, then they can't build any more hangars. And we have some folks right now that are looking at the airport and would like to take it over. They're negotiating with Earl to do that, but this has to be done before they're going to be comfortable investing their money in it.
So if they don't invest their money and Earl doesn't sell it, then where are we?
Well, we're still on the hook for $152,000 that we're going to eventually have to pay.
Right.
Because the county, we made a commitment to the county before Earl did the last one. Now, by the way, it's not like we did this without knowing what was going on. We back years ago, the FAA funds would pay for this, or pay for a portion of it. I think 80%, Patrick, 80%. We could generally get 10% from the state and then 10% from us. So we were looking at 15,000 back then when we made this commitment, but now the FAA has changed what they will fund, and it has to be directly related to the runways, to the very center. They won't even pay for the whole width between the hangars now. It's just the area that the planes, when they're in the center, drive on. So after we went through all this and spent the money for the design, everything else, and made a commitment to the county to do it, built the hangar to create more revenue, to try to help with the operation, stay in black, then they pull those funds away from us. Now we're stuck.
I guess I'd want to think, how many people in Medina, how many residents in Medina are positively, affected in a positive way if we spend that $100,000.
Well, we just approved the money for the study as well.
Right.
So that was 150,000?
That was total grant money, yes.
That's grant money. There's
That's
grant
coming
money?
back
Okay.
money.
Yeah.
Well, the residents are benefited, sir, because the businesses in the community use that airport, and the businesses in the community are paying income tax to keep it at a lower level for our residents. So it might be a roundabout way, but there is a direct benefit. I mean, you know that. You're the one that secured it when you were in the mayor's office for us. And it costs money to have it and to upkeep it. And Earl and his group are doing the best they can, but this is something that the feds changed the cards on us, and we have no choice but to get this done.
Paul?
Well, the mayor answered the question I had, if we would be able to use if there was any of that 150,000 left over, if we could, but he answered the question because it's very limited parameters. But I do agree that even though there's no direct benefit to the individuals in the city, the greater Medina community does benefit from this. And while...
Well, the only place we could probably take it out is general purpose capital, not operating funds. And there's money in general purpose capital to do it, but there'll be less money for other decisions that we're going to make that we'll have to modify.
Okay, could we do something, we can look at it later, maybe taking some of the income generated from the airport to, or because of the airport, I should say, to maybe replenish that?
We're trying to do that already with the fuel tank, and we
It's not going so
still
well.
have to be paid back a few $100,000.
Okay, all right.
So I would suggest taking it out of the 301 capital account instead of taking out of any operating funds of the general fund, just because I don't think we can afford to take it out of the general fund.
I agree.
But general purpose capital, there's an amount of money in there, and I think we're down to, I want to take a guess, 2.4 million or something like that.
I
Yeah,
don't have that in front of me. We have some advances being repaid into there, though, that are going to replenish that a little bit.
So that would be probably the most appropriate fund to take it out of.
Mayor, do you feel comfortable with that if it came out of?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I do want to thank Greg and Greg and the mayor, because it was very generous of the Stevenson Foundation, but it was their work that got Stevenson to agree to a third of this here. That was not an easy sell. And I guess I just want to say again, like, we are so thankful and lucky to have the Stevenson Foundation in Medina. I cannot tell you how many times they come through for the city. You just heard for the pool, for this. The list is unbelievable how many things they've been involved with in this community.
Any other comments?
I agree with Jim.
So is there a motion to approve to take it out of the 301 account?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thanks. And the final one is 2144, increase PO 201160 Rocco Masonry from Public Buildings. Mr. Picoli.
Thank you, Mr. President. You may have noticed that we repaired and replaced a lot of the bricks and mortar around City Hall. It was in dire need of being fixed up, so it looks really good. We started out with a $10,000 PO, went to $15,000. We have this slab that's outside these doors here that is compromised, along with the steps and the banister that holds the banister. We're going to replace that, and that's another $3,300. So I'm asking to respectfully increase this PO to $20,000, which will get us to that work being completed. Thank you.
Questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That concludes the finance meeting.
Mr. Coyne.
And
Mr. Coyne.
who's saying that?
Keith.
Who?
Keith.
Oh, Keith.
I apologize. I have to come back to the debt for a minute. Before the meeting, Mr. Councilman Rose mentioned to me he felt we should issue this fall to take advantage of current rates. The reason I have to come back now is I thought, okay, well, we could do that at the next meeting, but with council's break coming up, if we're going to do a debt issue this fall, I will have to be at the next council meeting with ordinances to hire bond counsel and underwriters. So I need to know the consensus from council as a group. Do you want to do an issue this fall, or do you want to wait till next spring? If we're going to wait till next spring, we can wait on this and we can hire an underwriter and so on later. But if we're doing a debt issue this fall, I'm going to have to be at the next meeting with ordinances to hire underwriter and bond counsel so we can start that process,
Understood.
because you'll have to pass it at your August meeting.
I think I looked at the whole thing, and we get better. There's more bond issue that we can refinance in the spring than the fall. And I don't. My personal opinion, I don't think rates are going to go up that high.
And, well, with the Fed purchasing corporate bonds now, that may have
It could have an impact on it, but they're not going to purchase them
inflation going
forever.
up and the like. I see rates going up, but if we're getting a larger amount of debt refinanced in April, maybe there'll be a wash then, because we'd save money on the cost of.
Right.
It is a substantially larger issue because there's another $11 million. It's an $11 million issue in the spring. It'd be a $3 million issue this fall. So it's a lot larger, and doing it as two separate, we'd pay double on the issuance costs. But I mean, as I mentioned in the email, there is some risk because Paul's right. I mean, if rates go up a whole bunch between now and next spring, some of that savings is going to evaporate. I just need to know.
I mean,
if we do it this fall.
and we don't have to do it, I guess, is the other question. If rates go up, skyrocket up, we don't have to.
Oh, we just wouldn't do it at all.
Right.
Oh, yeah, because we'd still, okay, all right. So if the rates stay below where we are now, we'll consider it, but okay.
Right.
Okay.
I was thinking spring, so I'm okay with spring.
Okay.
Break time.
We got 2 minutes because council's supposed to be started already, so 2 minutes and then we're going to start.
Okay.